What's up, guys? Lord Cable here, bringing you a beautiful, peaceful day here in the part of Marseille. Why don't you join me here on the little park bench on the beautiful cruiser de Grasse and sit with me for a while and listen to me babble on about clan wars and life and all these things. And yes, there is actually a park bench right here on the aft section of the de Grasse. So we're just gonna sit here and chill and watch the beautiful part of Marseille, watch the boats sail through and the little plane fly around the harbor, listen to the sounds of the church bells and the breeze and the beautiful sunset. It's a nice, peaceful day here in Marseille. But it's not about to be, because the second season of Clan Wars is coming. Yes, that is correct. Season 2 of Clan Wars is coming quickly, and I am here to give you my thoughts on how the season will progress. So, the first thing, honestly, I want to say is that I think that the cruisers will very much decide the meta. As you know, Clan Wars is tier 10. There is only one battleship per side, no carriers allowed. So that already rules out the Midway and the Hakuryu, absolutely non-issue. Second of all, with battleships making up only one of your 7 teammates, the power of which battleships will play in comparison to the other ships is negligible. And because destroyers, even with torpedoes, just can't manage the same damage output as the more capital ships, I think that the cruisers will very much dominate this Clan Wars as they did in the last one. Now, my assessment of Clan Wars basically revolves around the fact that the cruisers will decide the meta. In that I think that the cruisers, because their role will be so pivotal within this meta, I think that which cruisers are being played will heavily define the other ships of the meta. So I'm going to start first with the cruisers, which sounds kind of odd. Usually cruisers are kind of the ugly stepchild that everyone sort of hides in the closet and doesn't want to talk about. And I understand why. I mean, they're the least played class, bar carriers, of course. They're very fragile, they're very hard to play, and as a DD main, I understand that. As you can see, my tech trees tend to look very good on the destroyer side and not much else. But at any rate, we're gonna start with the cruiser that I think will be the most popular and the most powerful in this new meta, and that is, of course, is the Hindenburg. Now, why do I think the Hindenburg will decide the meta? First of all, the Hindenburg played a very large role in the last Clan Wars, which kind of surprised me. I didn't really expect it. And what does the Hindenburg have going for it? Now, first of all, it has German Hydro. German hydroacoustic search is a very strong tool when it comes to Clan Wars, especially since there's no carriers. You really don't have to worry about AA setups, and while the Hindenburg has a pretty decent AA setup, her Hydro is amazing. Her ability to detect torpedoes and enemy destroyers is unrivaled. Now, her concealment isn't the most spectacular. I don't personally own her. As you can see, she's sort of black and white here on my screen. But from what I understand, from what people have told me and from the videos that I've seen, the Hindenburg's concealment is not spectacular. I mean, it has a base detectability of 16 kilometers, which is not great, but in return, she has 12 main battery guns. They have a very good rate of fire, especially when you use the reload module, which most people tend to run on the Hindenburg. And in addition, she has extremely good fire starting capabilities, and she doesn't have to run IFHE because of the German HE pen rule, which gives them a 4th penetration instead of a 6th, which doesn't sound like a lot, but honestly, it's pretty powerful when it comes down to it. So even though the German HE isn't the most spectacular in the world, the rate of fire means that this ship is extremely potent. And while she doesn't have quite railguns like the Moskva or the Zhou, her guns are very accurate, and, well, accurate may not be the right term. You have 12 guns. They're very consistent, and in the hands of a proper player, she can be a very wicked ship to play with or against. And all these factors, and also, I almost forgot to mention, her turtle backing. Even the German cruisers have the turtle backing. Now, while it's not as powerful as the turtle backing on their battleships, it still means that it's going to be very difficult to citadel this ship. which gives it a huge advantage against the other cruisers who have to adopt a little bit more of a reserved playstyle in order to not die. The Hindenburg can tank a little bit more damage and be okay. And while her speed isn't the greatest, her ability to take damage and keep going gives her a sizable advantage when it comes to any sort of engagement. So she's a very good roaming ship. She's a ship that can get on the flanks and she can do good damage. And honestly, she's just very good all around. She's going to be a hard ship to counter. So I think that the Hindenburg, for these above reasons, will be the most played ship in the meta. And she's not going to be alone. I think that there will be some other ships that are very powerful, but the Hindenburg will be the #1 cruiser choice in this new meta. Now, interestingly enough, the ship that I think will play a similar role to the Hindenburg is the Zhou. Now, the Zhou we didn't see too much of in the original season of Clan Wars. Now, it was a rental ship, so it was a little bit on the it was being played, but not as heavily as the Hindenburg. Now, I watched a lot of the King of the Sea 5, and I noticed that Omni played Zhou pretty heavily, and I think for that reason specifically, she will be played, and I also think that, just in general, she's a very good ship. She's sort of an underrated ship. Now, Zhou has been around since the beginning of the game, really, and I say underrated in terms of more Clan Wars and less in terms of just straight up she's underrated, because the Zhou is a very potent ship, always has been, and always will be. Her fire starting potential is legendary, and even without stealth fire, she's still an extremely dangerous threat. Now, what does the Zhou have? What does the Zhou bring to the table that the Hindenburg does not? And the answer to that is pretty much stealth. As you can see, her 12.6 kilometer detectability by sea means that she is she's much more stealthy than the Hindenburg is. And in fact, besides the Minotaur, which is basically a non-factor, the Zhou will be the stealthiest cruiser at tier 10, which means that she can move into position very, very easily, and her 203s are nasty. While they don't have the same rate of fire as the Hindenburg, they pack a wallop, especially with this Japanese HE, and even her AP is very underrated. Her AP can do a lot of good work, and I've seen some videos of her citadeling Missouris and Montanas with her AP, so do not underestimate the power of the Zhou's AP. In addition, she mounts the F3 torpedoes, and just in general, she's a really powerful ship. And also she has the Zhou troll armor, which it's just troll armor. That's what it is. It auto bounces all sorts of weird stuff. She's a monster, really. And so I think she will see a lot of play, not nearly as much as Hindenburg, but I think that she will see some play, and she will be a valuable player in this new meta. Now, the other tier 10 ship that I think will be played, or the other tier 10 cruiser that I think will be heavily played, well, it's only tier 10 really, but I think that the Moskva will be the tier 10 of choice for radar. And while her radar doesn't last as long as Des Moines, she has a much longer range on her radar. But I don't think the range or the length of the radar is really the issue here. The main issue with the Des Moines, or the main strength of the Zhou, oh my gosh, I can't speak today. The main issue of the Moskva is her heavy armor and large hit pool. And this allows her to bow tank while most other cruisers would suffer. Now, her concealment is awful. 18 kilometers detectability is terrible. And even with captains and concealment expert and camos and all that good business, she's still not a very stealthy ship. So, in all honesty, I think that she will see limited play, at least as a one-of, in terms of cap contesting. She will be very good at warding off destroyers from cap. She has the excellent railguns. Her main weaknesses are extreme vulnerability to flanking because of her large citadel. And she doesn't have very good DPM, sustained DPM. Her guns are large caliber, they punch through a lot of stuff, they're very good at destroying other cruisers, even battleships who shoot a broadside, but she is fairly vulnerable and she does not put out a lot of DPM. So she can be spammed, she can be flanked, and because of her concealment, she's hard to hide. But I think that she will see play much more than Des Moines, if only because the armor scheme on the Moskva is so much better, her health pool is better, and overall, I think she's a better pick for Clan Wars. If you're looking for a radar ship, Moskva will definitely see more play than the Des Moines. Now, ships that I do not think will see play, or will not see significant play in Clan Wars, are, let's see, cruisers. The Minotaur. The Minotaur is laughably bad. There are a lot of radars running around at tier 10. There's a lot of very good players, and battleship captains will know how to counter her, destroyer captains will know how to counter her, cruiser captains will know how to counter her. Honestly, I just think she's a poor choice. She's literally a floating citadel. Can she be successful? Yes. Do I think that she will be successful? Probably not. I think she's too situational to be of specific use in clan battles. I think she's much more suited to randoms, where as long as you don't run into super unicums, you can rack up massive damage, but anyone with a brain in their head knows how to counter a Minotaur, and so for that reason, I think the Minotaur will not have a significant impact on this meta. Other ships that I don't think will have significant impact. The Des Moines. The Des Moines is really an AA ship. She has radar, it's an excellent radar, but she has thin armor, her health pool isn't spectacular, her guns, while they have good DPM, are very floaty, and overall, she just doesn't bring anything to the table that other ships don't bring better. Besides her radar, I mean, the Hindenburg out DPMs her. The Moskva has better armor, and has radar. The Zhou has better concealment. I mean, the Des Moines just doesn't have anything going for it that the other ships don't already bring. And since carriers are out of the question, even her AA supremacy is useless. So you'd be stuck running a Des Moines with standard hydro instead of German hydro, where the Hindenburg would be better. You have a radar, but you don't have armor or the ability to tank damage like the Moskva, so you lose out there. The Zhou has better concealment, so in the end of the day, the Des Moines is just sort of, its jack-of-all-trades nature has sort of excluded it from being good. It doesn't perform any of its roles well enough to be a significant portion of the meta. And finally, we come to the French with the Henry IV. I think the Henry IV is a fantastic ship. And honestly, when I finish with all my destroyers, the Henry will be the first cruiser that I pursue. I think the Henry is a fantastic ship. However, I think her main drawback is her lack of early game impact. And I think people like Flamu and Irun have said it best when they simply say the Henry does not have enough early game impact to be successful. Her playstyle is very much the same playstyle as the Kabarast. She's a kite and shoot kind of ship. She doesn't have good sustained DPM because of her large gun caliber. Her arcs are rather floaty, and she just doesn't have the ability to take an area and hold it down like the other cruisers do. The Hindenburg and the Moskva had better armor. She doesn't have good concealment. Her gun caliber is too large to give sustained DPM. And while she's good at kiting, her main target is usually battleships. And because there's only one per team, she's really not going to have a great use. And her speed is really irrelevant when it comes to clan wars because most of the fighting is done around the cap zones. And, I mean, the Henry kind of lives for the open water. And the open water just isn't where the battles take place. So for that reason, I don't think that the Henry will be a significant portion of the meta. So what does this mean for the other classes? So I've gone over the cruisers. What does that mean for battleships? Well, because the three cruisers that I outlined, the Moskva, the Hindenburg, and the Zhou, will be the main players, I think the battleships will have to play accordingly. So the battleship that I think will have the most impact on Clan Wars this season is the Montana. Why do I think that the Montana is so good in this season? Well, first of all, Montana has fairly good concealment when you get a concealment captain on her. She can actually get better concealment than the Moskva, I believe, which is pretty laughable. Now, she doesn't have the insane concealment of the Conqueror, but in return, her 12 main battery guns have better accuracy. And, of course, the American armor-piercing shells are fantastic. So the Montana has the ability to drop a very large load of lead on any cruiser, delete any competent Montana captain can really do a number on cruisers. She can reposition well because of her decent speed. She's just a very good all-around battleship. She has decent armor when angled. And while she's not a brawler, you don't really need to brawl as a battleship in Clan Wars. Your goal is to be near the rear of the battle and to shoot cruisers, really, is your main goal. Now, should you tank damage? Yes, and by being at the rear, I don't mean being all the way in the back. You should be near your cruisers, supporting them, being the damage sponge, and dishing out damage in kind. However, there's only one battleship. So you also have to play conservative with your health pool, and while the Montana does not have the best health pool at tier 10, I think that she does have a very good survivability when compared to the other battleships. Yamato and Kerr First have terrible concealment. Kerr First has a giant superstructure that eats HE damage, and while the Montana has a large superstructure, it's not nearly as large as the Kerr First. And her guns are more accurate, and she has better concealment. And honestly, I really think that the Montana is the best ship for this particular season, mainly because of her ability to delete cruisers. And since cruisers will be the main driving force behind this meta, I think that the Montana, for that reason, will be the best choice of battleship for this season. Now, the other battleships, if I were to choose a second battleship that I think will do the second best, I would probably say the Yamato. Now, the Yamato is not nearly as good as the Montana for a number of reasons. While her gun caliber is larger and she has 2.1 Sigma, which is pretty glorious, she only has 9 guns that she can bring to bear on an enemy, and so it'll be a little bit easier for cruisers to avoid that, because number one, overpens, and number two, her turret traverse is pretty slow, so she'll have a hard time reacquiring targets, switching flanks, that sort of thing. She's not a very fast ship, and she has a very vulnerable citadel. While the Montana citadel has been lowered below the waterline, the Yamato still has a very raised citadel. So she requires a bow-on sort of tanking playstyle, and Clan Wars has become very fluid, especially since since Hindenburg's and even possibly Zhou's will be moving around flanks and attacking and constantly chunking out DPM. The Yamato will just sort of be left behind. She'll be forced to fight a battle on multiple sides, where the Yamato is a very positional battleship, and without other battleships to help her to absorb damage, she'll fall very quickly, especially when flanked. Her turret traverse is bad, and honestly, I just don't think she'll have the same successes as the Montana. Other battleships. The Kerr First. The Kerr First can be spotted from the moon. The Kerr First is massive, and all that superstructure is free HE damage for any cruiser, any destroyer that can get close enough to spam her. She just eats HE damage like nothing else. In addition, her main battery is pretty weak in the sense that her dispersion is terrible. And while a secondary build Kerr First is pretty spicy when it comes to brawling, because there's only one other battleship, you're probably going to die from HE damage and fires before you even make it to close enough to the other battleship to brawl. And a concealment expert Kerr First it doesn't work. She's just too big. And while her citadel is very protected in comparison to the other battleships, because she takes so much HE damage and she's so large, I just can't see her being a particularly successful ship. And again, cruisers define the meta, and I think that the prevalence of cruisers will make the grosser Kerr First, who's primarily good at fighting other battleships, rather weak in comparison to the Montana. Other ships, Conqueror. Conqueror has excellent concealment. She has the best concealment of tier 10 battleships. She has 12 main guns, which sounds great. However, she has some significant weaknesses. She's plagued by 32mm armor everywhere, which means that, in all honesty, she's not gonna fare very well. HE spam will eat her alive. And because the British HE has the strange impact fuse timer, it's going to have a really hard time punching through battleships and even some of the angled armor of the cruisers that she faces. Uh, her 457 millimeter guns, while potent, still have terrible dispersion. You only have 8 of them, and if you're mounting the 419s, you gain guns, but you're still an HE slinger, and HE versus cruisers just doesn't feel good. Cruisers, especially since they have a 30-second maximum burn time now, I just don't see the Conqueror as being viable, especially considering her health pool is so low, and she eats so much HE damage, even with the super heal. I don't think that's enough to make the Conqueror the most viable battleship. I think in terms of viability, the Montana easily wins this race. So now my personal bread and butter. My idea of what destroyers will be played. So let's start with what I think will be the most successful. And we're going to go to the good old USA, and we're just going to go click on this Goering here. Goering is a ship I love. The Goering is a very exceptional ship. She's a jack of all trades. She has excellent guns, excellent torpedoes, very good concealment. She has the ability to mount defensive area, which I don't recommend for clan wars. But she's not super fast. But her concealment, her American smoke, which allows you to smoke up allies, you can smoke up yourself for a long period of time. The Goering is just an all-around very strong ship. And I think that she will be one of the most prevalent destroyers in clan wars, and I think that she will do very, very well, as Goering has always done in competitive in Tier 10. I just think that she is a very strong ship, and she deserves her place as the queen of the sea when it comes to destroyers. There's not a lot more to be said about that. She has pretty good handling. Her speed, again, something to be desired, but with all the other strengths, she more than makes up for her lack of speed with all the other aforementioned skills and traits of the Goering. Not a lot more that needs to be said about that. So let's move on to Japan, another ship that I think will do very well. The Shema Kaze. The original 2 destroyers in the Tier 10 destroyers in the game, I think the Shema Kaze will also do very well. Her concealment is competitive. She has 15 torpedoes, which allows her to break up any sort of stalemate in the battle by forcing the enemy team to maneuver. At the very least, it requires them to change position, which will give your cruisers and battleship time to shoot. She's fairly stealthy, fairly fast. And while her guns and smoke don't have the same punch as the Goering, I still think that the Shema Kaze, with the 15 torpedoes and in the 12-kilometer variant, will be very successful in clan wars. And so I definitely recommend her as a ship to play if you decide to take the Shema Kaze. I think she will do well. Now, a ship that I'm interested in testing, I'm not entirely sure whether or not she'll be successful, but I am going to give it a try, is the Z-52. The Z-52 is a bit of an enigma because her concealment is worse than just about every other destroyer. The only concealment that's worse than hers is the Khabarovsk, and the Khabarovsk is barely a destroyer. The Z-52 is a ship that I'm interested in testing because if there's not a lot of radar in the meta, if Hydro and the Hindenburg and the Zhou become the most prevalent cruisers, which I predict that they will be, then I think the Z-52 will be strong, because her ability to take a cap zone and to force enemy destroyers out and to give your team protection from torpedoes and destroyers with hydroacoustic search is extremely relevant. I think that she is an extremely powerful destroyer, and I think that given the right circumstances, she could be extremely successful. However, if the meta is a lot of Des Moines, which I don't think will be, and a lot of Moskvas, which I do think there will be, then I don't think she'll be as successful because she's outspotted by all the other destroyers, and she's not particularly fast. And while her torpedoes are very potent, she only has 8 of them, and their alpha is not very high. I believe it's 1440 or 14,400. Yeah. So while they reload fast, they don't pack a huge wallop. So really, when it comes to the meta, I think her placement will be entirely dependent on the cruisers, which again I think every ship will be, but the Z-52 most of all. I think her doing well or not will be entirely 100% dependent on the cruiser meta. And I'm going to test her out, and I will update you guys on whether or not I find her to be successful. Now, ships that I do not recommend or do not think will be particularly effective. We'll start with Pan-Asia with the Yu Yang. The Yu Yang is an extremely strong ship. And she's one of the better destroyers in the game right now. I don't personally have her, but I have spoken to people who do. I've played with people who do, and she plays very, very well. Her torpedoes are extremely stealthy. She is the stealthiest destroyer at tier 10. The main issue with the ship is her torpedoes being deep water. And the deep water torpedoes will cause her to be at an extreme disadvantage when fighting any other destroyers. And as a destroyer, your main objective is to kill the enemy destroyers. Is to get in the caps, kill them, spot for your team. If you cannot perform one of your class's major functions, then I find it very difficult to see this ship finding a success in the meta. Now, if the meta devolves into camping Moskvas and camping battleships, and everyone's sitting behind islands and just doing nothing, then yes, maybe I could see the Yu Yang seeing play. But beyond that, I really don't think that she has a place in the meta, even with the radar. Her radar is laughably bad, and without smoke, you're really not playing as a teammate at that point. You're playing for yourself. And because the Pan-Asian smokes you can smoke up constantly. There's a 10-second difference between your smoke and the next one. If you're playing without smoke, you're playing wrong, and because the Yu Yang it can't perform one of the major functions of destroyers, and for that reason, I can't recommend her as a destroyer to play in Clan Wars this season. Other destroyers, tier 10. The Soviet destroyers are the only other ones, I believe. The Gras Savoy and the Khabarovsk. We'll start with the Gras Savoy. I love the Gras Savoy. I have my highest damage in the Gras Savoy of any game ever. However, the Gras Savoy is an anti-air ship specifically. As you can see, 33 anti-air rating with full AA build. You get the plus 4 times you get the 4 times modifier. This ship is an anti-air ship, first and foremost. The problem is that there's no carriers. And if there's no carriers, the Gras Savoy just becomes a worse gearing. Your smoke is worse, and while your guns have better arcs, your rate of fire is worse, your torpedoes are worse, and while you have a slightly better speed, it doesn't really matter because your concealment is worse, and your handling is much worse. So at the end of the day, what you get with the Gras Savoy is you get a worse gearing. So why would you choose the Gras Savoy when you can bring the gearing? And I really don't have an answer to that. I mean, the gearing just is the superior choice. Now, if there were carriers, I would say yes, the Gras Savoy the Gras Savoy and the gearing would both be very viable choices. But the lack of carriers just makes the Gras Savoy irrelevant, unfortunately. Now, if you don't have a gearing, then yes, the Gras Savoy is an acceptable substitute, but if you have both, the gearing is just better. And so for that reason, I can't really recommend the Gras Savoy for Clan Wars. And the final ship, this one breaks my heart, the Khabarovsk. The Khabarovsk was my first tier 10. It is one of my absolute favorite ships in this game. She's a beauty. She really is. She's a gorgeous ship. I love her. The main issue with the Khabarovsk is she's not really a destroyer. She plays like a light cruiser. Her concealment with the steering module is 9.7, which you really have to run. You can't really play with concealment anymore because her rudder shift is laughably bad, even with the module. So it really comes down to you running around the map shooting at people. But that's the role that the Hindenburg plays. That's the role that the Zhou plays. And to a lesser extent, that's the role that the Moskva will play. So, in the end, what you get is a ship that just... It can't out-DPM the Hindenburg. It can't out-DPM the Zhou. It struggles to out-DPM anything, really, when it comes to... It can't put out the same raw damage as the cruisers, is what I'm trying to say. She can't do the same raw damage that the cruisers can put out. She is very vulnerable, especially to the Hindenburg and the Zhou. Those two ships are extremely deadly to the Khabarovsk, and I think that those will be the two most played cruisers. And of course, the Moskva I can't really say that the Zhou will be played more than the Moskva. I think Hindenburg and Moskva will be the main ships, followed closely by Zhou. And honestly, the Khabarovsk suffers to all of those, but especially the Hindenburg, which I feel will be the most played ship. In addition, the Khabarovsk's main opponent, the ships that you really want to run into when you're playing the Khabarovsk, are battleships. And because the meta is so cruiser-driven, because there's only one battleship per side, the Khabarovsk is going to have a hard time filling its role, which is battleship hunter. You hunt battleships, you spam them with HE, you light them on fire. Cruisers have the 30-second match burn time now, or 30 seconds max burn time. And for that reason, the Khabarovsk just cannot fulfill its role to the potential that you need it to for it to be viable. You lose a destroyer slot if you bring the Khabarovsk. So, for example, a typical Clan War setup is one battleship, 4 cruisers, and 2 destroyers for a team of 7. If you give up one of your destroyers, you lose 50% of your capture point potential. Because at 9.7 concealment, you have a very comparable concealment to the Zhou. And that just is not going to win you games. You cannot cap when you're outspotted by the cruisers that kill you. If you give up a cruiser slot to bring your Khabarovsk, you lose out on a very large amount of damage dealing potential, especially in the Alpha Strike. The Khabarovsk just cannot deal the same amount of damage as a cruiser can, say a Hindenburg or a Zhou or a Moskva. It doesn't bring the same skills to the table. And, of course, you can't give up a battleship slot, because the battleships are the only thing that keep the cruisers in check. The battleship is the thing that says cruisers don't run amok. And so what you're left with at the end of the day is a meta that is extremely unfavorable to Khabarovsks. Now, if the Kaba, for example, were to... Or if the meta, for example, were to devolve into camping behind islands with the Moines and Moskvas, and the battleship being Yamato, and they just sit there in reverse for the entire game and shoot at each other across the map, then the Khabarovsk would be an excellent ship, because, number one, Des Moines has a hard time hitting her. The Yamato has difficulty with turret traverse and positioning, so you'd be able to flank very easily, and the cruisers wouldn't really be able to do much about it. Radar is of negligible worry as a Khabarovsk, because you don't really sit in smoke anyway, and you're going to be spotted for the majority of the game regardless. So unless you're trying to fill a role that you don't fit into, which is cap taker, you're really going to be an asset to your team in that specific scenario. But in any other scenario, especially one where the Hindenburg and the Zhou are prevalent, the Khabarovsk just cannot be recommended by me for Clan Wars, as sad as that is to say. And I've been, especially people in my clan, a lot of people have been interested in playing the Kaba, and I've repeatedly said that the Kaba will not be viable for those before specified reasons, and it kills me to say that, because I love the Khabarovsk. I played it last season, but it just doesn't have what it takes to win. And when you want to get that Stalingrad flag, it's all about playing what's best for the meta, playing what's best for your team. And the Khabarovsk just isn't a team ship. It's not a team-oriented ship. It's all about how much damage you can deal, how much speed you can have, and you can heal yourself, but it's not really viable for team play. So those are the reasons that I specified that I don't recommend Kaba. So what will I personally be playing this season? Well, as I specified before, I'm definitely going to test the Zed. If I like it, which I'm currently really liking the ship right now, I will definitely play her in Clan Wars. However, if the meta dictates, I will go to Goering, I will go to Shema Kaze, and I will play those ships as well. I'm my team's destroyer main, so I will do everything in my power to make sure that my team has the best destroyer coverage that it can possibly have. So if you run into me, Lord Cable, RNG Clan, say hi, give me a wave, tell me what you think, and definitely in the comments, guys. If you disagree, if you agree, talk to me. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you think my assessment is spot on. Tell me if you think it's completely off. Give me reasons why. I want to generate debate. I want to generate a conversation. And I want to know what you guys think. I'm really interested to know. So if you guys like the video, please be sure to like it. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the other videos on the channel. Check out my friend's channels, links in the description. And give me a wave if you see me in game. I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to chat with you on the comments section. Hit me up. So anyway, it's been Lord Cable talking about Clan Wars, and catch you guys on the seas.